I actually got my own TV show. I did 2 TV shows between the Meatball Shop, and then I had a TV show called Food Porn where I traveled around on A&E, and I traveled to all these different cities. And
I want to talk a little bit more about that because I prepared Carla. I said, Carla, I just need to prepare you. This is the first time I'm ever going to talk about porn on the Seismic Shift, and I'm talking about it. We're talking about food porn. I saw that. Welcome to the Seismic Shift podcast, where we explore the seismic shifts that are shaking up the way that we work and the way that we live. And y'all, just brace yourselves because I have the coolest guest on the show today. I am so grateful that Michael Chernow has agreed to come on the Seismic Shift podcast. I fell in love with him and his humanity and his soul. And we had this face-to-face podcast, Kreatures of Habit. It's super successful podcast. And we were face to face in Times Square. And at the very end of the podcast, I've never ever in my life asked another podcast host. I said, you have to come on my podcast. And we're so grateful for him to be here today. Give it up for Michael.
Thank you so much for having me. Super fired up to be here. Michelle, I loved our podcast. Your energy is infectious. Obviously, I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast loves hearing from you every time you drop an episode, just because your energy, just your voice. I mean, you're like a shining light. So I'm very, very excited and happy and grateful to be here.
Oh, Michael, thank you. I have so many questions for you because you got to sit on the other side and ask me questions about my new book. And we're not talking about anything about me. This is all about you. So I got to experience your bar, the Daily Bar, which was delicious. So he sells protein bars and overnight oats. And he had the Meatball Shop. So he's a TV personality, podcast host, restaurateur. It's almost like what doesn't he do? And a fitness expert, and he gets connection. So the reason why he's here today and sharing his gift of his precious time with us is I want you all to learn from him, this serial entrepreneur who continues to find success no matter what he dives into. I want to hear about your story. You posted on Instagram today the most gorgeous post with pictures of your life and all the different stages and the ups and the downs and meeting your beautiful wife and having your kids, and then some of the dark stages of your life too. Thank you for your transparency and honesty. Will you share your listeners how the heck you got to this level of success?
Well, thank you. I don't think it's necessary to walk through the fire to get to become unshakable. But I do think that when one walks through the fire, there's a level of humility that we have no choice but to walk with in life. And, I've been through a lot. I'm grateful for every single second of it. Quite frankly, even though some of it was really dark, I wouldn't change any of it because I really do believe that I had to go through what I went through to get to where I'm at. And I love that. A lot of us, every single person listening to this podcast right now has gotten through every single hard time in their life to date. If you're listening, you've made it through every single challenge, hardship, painful experience life has delivered you. Because you're alive, you're here, and if you're going through it right now, let those words sink in. We get through life, we just do, until our last day, and we hope that stretches for as long as possible. But I grew up in New York City, in Manhattan, right in the belly of the beast in 1980, and that was kind of a time in New York, in the world really, where I like to think that modern culture really started then, right? Like in fashion, in music, in food, really, New York was sort of this epicenter of creativity and culture globally. And I was born right into it. I lived in a small apartment with my mother, my father, my sister, and 2 cats. And there wasn't a lot of money. We weren't poor. There wasn't a lot of money. And for whatever reason, I have always been drawn to making, doing, and creating since I was born, since I was a little kid. Like I never, if I had toys that I wasn't using anymore or I wasn't interested in anymore, I used to ask my older sister to come downstairs with me in front of our apartment building. I would lay out a blanket. I'd line up all my toys that I didn't want, and I'd try to sell them on the street for $1.
Wow.
And my sister would roller skate up and down 87th Street, and I was on the corner, selling my toys. And so I've just always been drawn, and I gravitate towards lifting up rocks. I'm a discovery junkie. Curiosity is like my middle name. Like I'm just a very curious human. And so that kind of, I believe I was born with that. I used to have a podcast called Born or Made. And the premise of that podcast was to get people on that inspired me, that have done really cool things in life, and ask them, do you think you were born with this ability? Or do you think you were created and cultivated over time? And it was always a 50-50 split. But I personally do believe that some people are just born with the desire to hunt and lift up rocks and see what's underneath. And I know I'm one of them. I can't explain to you why I am able to take risks and get out there and see what life's got to offer. And so anyway, I grew up in this little apartment, and my father and I had a really rough relationship. My father was a sick man mentally and physically, ultimately, very abusive verbally when I was a little kid. And then as I got a little bit older, it escalated to, physical. And once I was able to stand up to him, he and I ended up not really, blending well. And child services got involved, police got involved, and ultimately I was, my mother was also caught in the crossfire. We were in this confined space. My sister and I shared a bedroom until we were in our early teens, and it just got ugly. It got real ugly. And I didn't know what to do. I was a kid, and it's so crazy for me to think about it because I'm a father now. And also I should say, I don't blame my father. My father's long gone. He's passed away a long time ago. I don't blame my father for the decisions that I made, in my early adolescence and into my early 20s. But I can say that it's so hard for me to think about what could have been going through my father's mind when he was treating me the way he was when I was a little kid. The things he said, the striking me, I can't, being a dad of 2 sons, like I could never imagine it. Right now, I think that there's a time and a place for throwing down the law and, letting your children know that there's boundaries and, sometimes raising your voice. Right. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but, verbally abusing and then ultimately, striking your kid, I just don't believe in. And so it got bad. I tried to commit suicide when I was 12, and I didn't want to die, but I definitely wanted a hug from my dad, and I didn't get it. He actually did the exact opposite and ended up like beating me up because I did it right in front of him. And it was just a cry for help. It was a cry for help, and it was really dark, and it was, but it happened. It's a part of my life that stands out. It's a very clear and vivid memory. And so they put me in a mental institution because I came to school the next day. Obviously, I didn't, cut my res deep enough, but I'd taken the action. And so I was already in the social worker's office on a pretty regular basis. They saw that I had bandage on my wrist, and they said, what happened here? And I told them what happened. And they immediately sent me off to Payne Whitney. And I got evaluated, and I told those doctors there, hey, look, this is what's going on at home. Like I don't want to die. I want love from my father, basically. I want a hug. I want a dad. And there was other things that had happened prior to that. Like, because it was so rough at home for me, I got, I looked for love and, fatherly love in different places. And ultimately I got led right into the hands of a pedophile who ultimately was molesting me as a little kid. So I'd experienced that, and I didn't realize that until I was a little bit later on in my teens. But, there was just a series of things that happened. And pretty soon after that experience at Payne Whitney, I found alcohol and I found substances. Right. And it saved my life, honestly. Like I don't know where I would have been without that stuff, quite frankly, at that time, because it really did give me confidence. I was able to feel comfortable in my own skin because I was able to numb some of the negative thoughts. And that just set me off on a 11-year journey of suffering. There were obviously some good times and fun times, but ultimately it became an addiction, and a bad addiction. And I moved out of my parents' house when I was 15. I was complete recluse, running the streets of New York, and somehow, some way, I finished high school. I actually went to college for a year. At 23, at the end of my 23rd year, it got really ugly and really bad, and I ultimately overdosed on heroin. And it's so hard for me to even see those words slip through my lips because of who I am today.
Right.
Because I must have been in such pain to think that what I was doing made sense at the time. But after that happened, I still couldn't figure out a way to stop using drugs. And then 2 weeks later, there was just a tiny little moment of grace. And for me, God came into my life. That might not be for everybody. I have a deep relationship with God now. I didn't then, but at that time, I needed some grace. And somehow, some way, God slipped right in, and He said, "I got you," and gave me the courage to ask for help. And that set me off on the second chapter of my life, which is, now where I live, 21 plus years in recovery. And I'm so grateful for that, because I got sober and I found wellness immediately. The guy that came into my life, the person that I called, introduced me to her boyfriend. Her boyfriend came to meet with me. And this guy, Marcus, showed up, and he was a tough dude, covered in tattoos, tough guy. And I just thought that, I was like, okay, I'm going to get sober, and, my life is just going to be boring. I'm going to be hanging out in libraries and church basements. Like, I didn't know what sobriety was, because I didn't really know anybody who was sober outside of that one girl that I called. And this guy walked in the day I called, and I looked at him, and I was at the bottom of the barrel. I mean, I was at my worst, pretty much. I'd been there for a long time, but it was like pretty damn ugly for me, pretty dark. And this guy walked through the doors, sat down, and said, "Tell me your story." And I looked at him, and I was like, he had like a big gold Breitling on. And, I said, man, if this guy is sober, if that's what it is, I could do this. Like, I'd be interested in understanding what this dude does, because he looked happy and tough, and I wanted to learn more. So I told him my story for about 4 hours, and he listened to me, and right after the story, he had no judgment, and he just said, "I can help you, man." And this guy wrote out a plan for me, a daily plan, half hour by half hour. This is what you're going to do here. This is what you're going to do here. This is what you're going to do here. And it was a lot. And he said at the end of it, look, you don't have to do all this. You can continue living, your life the way you've been living it, but I promise you won't live past 25. And but if you follow this, by the time you're 25, you'll be living a life way beyond anything you could have ever imagined. And I believed him, and so I did, and I still do. And he's still a mentor and a brother to me. And I was on the phone with him for an hour and a half 2 days ago. This guy saved my life, and he introduced me to fitness and nutrition, and then ultimately mindfulness. And I just continued to put the right foot in front of the left. And, about 8-9 months into my recovery journey, I met the woman of my dreams, who, no one would have ever thought that I would settle down young, but I met the woman of my dreams, and I knew right away that she was my soulmate. And I called my grandfather, and because I didn't have a dad, and I didn't have really any like male figures outside of Marcus, who was like, who would, I'd run this by as well. But I called my grandfather, and I said, "Pop, I'm in love, like for real, and I'm gonna marry this woman. I'm like ready to ask her now." And he was like, "How long you been dating her?" I was like, "A couple of months." And he was like, "Whoa, buddy." He's like, "Take a breath." He's like, "Do you live with her?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Here's my advice. Live with her for a year. If you feel the same way after a year of living with her, you got my blessing. Go for it."
Great advice. Great
Yeah,
advice.
it's exactly what I did. I went, after that call, I basically said to Donna, I was like, you're staying at my house most nights. Why don't I move out of this place? I got to get out of here anyway. Like it's too many bad memories in this apartment. Let's go get a place together. And that's what we did. And 11 months to the date, I asked her to marry me. And so we've been married for, we're coming up on 20 years of marriage, which is crazy, right? Like crazy.
And two adorable boys.
Like I pinch myself on a regular basis because I have just the most incredible wife. Of course, marriage is a journey, right? You go through ups and downs, but my wife she is just my rock. And we communicate very regularly, and communication is the key to our relationship. It just is. And when she needs some space or I need some space, we say it. We have, one thing that I'll share with the audience that I think has been super duper helpful for our marriage and our relationship. So we sit down at dinner every night as a family at 6:00, and that's never something I did as a kid. We never had dinner together. But ever since Donna and I have been married and, introduced children into our lives, we have dinner every single night at 6:00 together. And after dinner, the kids will excuse themselves and take care of their dishes or whatever, and then go, play basketball or do whatever they want to do. And Donna and I sit at the dinner table together for 20 minutes to a half an hour, and we talk. And, we didn't do that we've only been doing that for about a year and a half intentionally. And I owe it to my wife for that, because I didn't even think about it, but like we would have dinner and then like everybody would just get up and like, move on to the next thing. And so ever since we've started doing that every single night, sitting and talking to each other, reflecting on each other's day, asking each other how our days went, filling her in on my day, she filled me in on her day, it just brought our connection so much deeper and so much closer. And it's a little thing that makes a big impact. And what I've learned in life is that the small things tend to make the biggest waves. So anyway, after, we got married in 2007, I went to culinary school. I decided to go back to school and truly, get a degree. I was working in restaurants all through my childhood and into my early 20s. And, I decided when I got sober that I was going to really take this hospitality thing seriously. Went to culinary school, got a degree in culinary arts and restaurant management. It took me about 2 years. Once I graduated, I was 27, and I wrote a business plan. And I was working at this restaurant for, at that point, almost 8 years. And so these guys that were coming to this restaurant, great restaurant in the East Village of New York City, it was a regular's place. And I'm going to wrap this up, I promise. I'm almost done.
No, please don't. This is amazing.
So, and Frank, by the way, the guy who owned this restaurant, also was a massive catalyst to me getting sober. Because the day that I got sober, I had slept through work, because I had just been up for probably 2 or 3 days. And when I did that, Frank called me down to the restaurant and he said, "Mikey, I love it. I love you to death. You're dying. Everybody knows it. Everybody sees it. You're not hiding it. We can't, this is not a good environment for you. You drink here, you use drugs here. We all know it. And also, like, it's not uncommon in the restaurant industry to do that, but he was like, I got to fire you, man. I love you. I just got to do it. You got to get your life together. You have to get sober. And he said that. And that was like in an echo chamber for me. It was like sober. And so many people have said to me at that stage of my life, man, you got to get it together, dude. You're going to die. And I just couldn't hear it until that moment. And that's when God came and said, "Hey, I'm here right now. I don't know how long I'll be here, but take my hand."
You heard it. You were able to hear it.
I was able to hear it. And so anyway,
is this where the Meatball Brothers or the Meatball Shop is coming? Your idea? Is this where it all started?
So basically, so Frank hired me when I was 20. I wrote this business plan at 27, and Frank let me keep my job at this restaurant. So I was working at this restaurant for a long time. The regulars at this restaurant saw this crazy kid that everybody loved, Mikey the bartender, get his life together, get sober, get married, go back to school, graduate school, and now I had this mission. I was going to open up my own restaurant. It was just what I was going to do. And so I wrote this business plan and I put it in front of all the regulars when they came in. And 14 of them wrote me a $25,000 check.
Oh my goodness.
And that was how I started the Meatball Shop. And that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. You know, I opened up the Meatball Shop when I was 29 in February of 2010. And it took off like wildfire. Within the first year, I mean, we had, 4-hour waits. We were cooking meatballs live on Jay Leno, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Chelsea Handler, Good Morning America, The Today Show. I mean, it was off the chart crazy. The Meatball Shop hit New York City like a ton of bricks in 2010.
I'm so bummed I missed it.
It was crazy.
Wow.
And so that was the beginning of the journey, and I got a crash course in business. School can only get you so far, right? Like you need to get thrown into the wolves, and I was in the den of wolves for sure, because not only did the restaurant, we had projected $1.25 million in our first year, and we did $4 million. So we paid back all of our investors, and there was just so many people that wanted to give us money to grow it. And Daniel and I were like, oh my God, like, what, my business partner, we're like, what do we do here? Like, we gotta learn on the fly here. We gotta learn we gotta build as we grow, And so we took on some cash and we opened up 5 more restaurants in 3 years. So we had 6 meatball shops. Daniel and I couldn't figure out where we wanted to take it out of market. We didn't see eye to eye on it. And I lost an opportunity to change my life financially, and I could not convince Daniel that it was the right deal to take. So I had to take a back seat, and to that opportunity that would have put $10 million in my pocket. Daniel now will say, it was the worst decision he ever made, not taking my lead on that. But anyway, I decided once that deal, I couldn't get that deal pushed over the line because Daniel thought the business was worth more money. I decided that was my cue to say, okay, you know what? Why don't you guys buy me out? You can do what you want. I know that I have what it takes to open up another restaurant business, and I don't want anybody standing in my way of decision making. So I sold those guys a bunch of my equity. I did well for my first business exit.
Yeah.
Stayed on for, I still retain 10% of that company. It's still alive, whatever 15, it's a 15-year-old business. But I knew that I wanted to create again. And so I sold a bunch of equity. And then in 2015, I opened up my second restaurant concept called Seymours.
Yes.
And the exact same thing happened. The exact same thing. I had no partners in that business, and we opened the store, and we were #1 restaurant in New York City for 9 months in a row, New York Magazine, TV shows, and I actually got my own TV show. I did 2 TV shows between the Meatball Shop, and then I had a TV show called Food Porn where I traveled around on A&E, and I traveled to all these different cities. And
I want to talk a little bit more about that because I prepared Carla. I said, Carla, I just need to prepare you. This is the first time I'm ever going to talk about porn on the Seismic Shift, and I'm talking about it. We're talking about food porn. I saw that. And so you're still doing it, correct?
No, it was only 2 seasons. We only shot 2 seasons, but it was incredible because it really, media for me is something I love media. I'm like not afraid of it. You put me anywhere, you put a live camera, whatever. Like I'm just gonna, I think your audience can probably tell at this point that like human beings are my superpower. Yeah. Connection for me is everything. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, never will be, never claim to be, never want to be.
I hear you, and I'm going to serve as your coach for 1 second. I don't want you saying that anymore. You're freaking brilliant, Michael. You're brilliant. I wanted to say that to you in New York City. That seems to be something you say, like, I'm really good at connection. I might not be the smartest dude in the room. You might be. I don't want you to be arrogant and cocky, but I want you to stop saying you're not the smartest guy in the room because you might.
I appreciate that. I think what I mean by that is, and this is just from my experience in business, I am emotionally intelligent. I think probably if there was an EQ barometer, just like there's an IQ barometer, like you can take a test for IQ, you can't really take a test for EQ. But if there was a test for EQ, humbly, I would say that I'd probably reach genius level in EQ, like scale.
I agree.
And that's something that I have had. And I'm not saying that in an egotistical way or a cocky way. I'm saying that in a confident way. I know that this is my God-given talent to be able to
You love connection and
I love it.
yeah, and just soul to soul and finding the similarities and commonalities. You're really good at that.
For me, thank you. For me, conversations with human beings is what makes my heart beat. It just is. I could do it all day long. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. You put me in the jungle or at the foot of the White House, I'm making friends and long-term relationships. Like I believe in relationships.
And so media and the camera loves you and you're a natural at it. So I thought food porn was still going on. What is your next in media? Because you need to be doing something big.
Well, I mean, I think so. What I've kind of done is I built Seymours. I scaled it to 6 stores. I knew that I was going to do that business for 5 years. I ended up taking on a partner who I knew was a restaurant scaling savage. And I said to him, hey, when we can get this business to $25-ish million profitable, I'd love to be able to sell you my equity so that I can go create again, because I just have this urge to want to create. And I'm not interested in a business that solely becomes logistics and ops, right? Like I need there to be creativity. And when you build a restaurant concept, after a certain amount of time, it really does become about P&L, operations, and SOPs. And though those are incredibly important, that's not I'm not going to shine in that environment, right? Like that's not where I'm going to be. That's not where my skill set is going to be most, valuable. So I said to Jay, hey, like come on board about a year and a half in. Let's scale this thing together up to somewhere between 5 and 10 stores and see what we do together. And then at a certain point, I'm going to knock on your door and say, hey, let me out of here. and so that's what we did with Seymours. After Seymours, I knew that I didn't want, after opening up 13 restaurants over the course of my restaurant career, I knew that I didn't want to scale restaurants anymore, but I knew that I needed a medium to be able to connect with human beings. And so I had come up with a concept, and I also knew that I wanted wellness to be at the core of my business, no matter what I did, because wellness saved my life and it saves my life on a regular basis. And I want to help as many people understand that, it's not about the cars and the homes and the C-suite title. It's about how you feel about yourself on a daily basis. Happiness has nothing to do with a thing. Happiness has to do with a feeling. And that's my experience. So I just wanted to give people the opportunity, because I feel like when there's a lot of lost human beings just in general, right? Especially now, there's a lot of lost human beings, and I was certainly one of them. I didn't understand that I was looking for external solutions, and I didn't understand that the solution had nothing to do with what I see in front of my eyes. It's actually everything behind my eyes that makes all the difference in how I walk through life, how I conduct in life. I just, I wanted to create a wellness brand, and that's what I did. And so media is something I've really converted my television stuff into social media.
Yep.
And I have complete control over it. I've been really successful with it, and I've built an awesome community. And I'm sure there's going to be some television down the road again.
There will. So I believe there will. You have the it factor when it comes to that. And yes, social media is where it's at right now. I think you have an opportunity. Let me ask you this. What gets you most excited each day? Because you do have all these products that you're selling. What gets you out of the bed most excited?
I think it really does boil down to how many humans can I connect with on a daily basis. Like I flew down to Austin. I'm in Austin, Texas, because I have some cool opportunities down here. But really what I wanted to do was spend time with friends. Like I wanted to be, and there's such a great network of humans down here. Every single night I've invited a bunch of people to go for dinner and to do cool shit and to go to my buddy. My buddy has a really awesome house where he's got a sauna and a cold plunge. And I've just called everybody. I said, Eric, I'm going to invite a bunch of people over every night, right? Are you cool with that? He was like, dude, bring them. And so, I've just called up a bunch of friends, and we've just been connecting and jamming and networking. And
how do you monetize connection? That's the real question. I just realized talking to you. How do we monetize connection?
I think ultimately, I guess I'll put it like this. If I've never created a business with the motivation of a high financial outcome. Of course, you think about what it could be, but if you're creating the business to make a whole bunch of money, you're gonna miss a lot of things along the way. And I think it's very similar with relationships. If you are out there developing relationships with an ulterior motive or with some sort of an angle, chances are those are not going to manifest abundance. But if you're out there developing and creating relationships because you love it, because you actually know that like the key biomarker for happiness in life is the quality of your personal relationships, it's a proven fact. Like Harvard has the longest standing human study that has shown over the last 100 years what develops happiness long term is the quality of your personal relationships. Period. Done. Nothing else touches it. Nothing else touches it.
And not just happiness. What's the biggest correlate to your health? Quality of relationships, to your longevity, quality of relationships, to your satisfaction and happiness. So everything points to that. Everything that matters, health, happiness, longevity.
I also believe that if you prioritize relationships in business, in life, but also in business, because I've always said the business of business is relationships, and the foundation of relationships is trust. It's just a fact. And when people are thinking about who they want to do business with, and they open up that mental Rolodex, the who should I contact about this? I promise you, they're going to swipe right past the person that rubbed them the wrong way. They're going to swipe right past, even that person might be a high performer. They're going to swipe right past the person that they didn't think would be enjoyable to be around. They're going to stop and consider highly the person that made the best impact on them in terms of how they made them feel. And I just believe at my core that, people gotta like you. They gotta like you for long-term success. And, we talked about this on my podcast. So I don't bend over backwards or, pander to make people think a certain thing about me. I just walk through life as a leader with my heart out front. And I've been steamrolled for that. People have certainly taken advantage of that. 100%. Absolutely. And I've probably lost a couple of million, if not more, dollars because of it. But I go to bed with a quiet mind at night because I know that the decisions that I make are heart-led. And I'm a blessed human, I don't, the only regret I have in my life is working too hard when I had my first son. I missed a couple years of his life in the beginning because I was just nose to the grindstone. And I think that was unfortunately necessary at the time. But ultimately, that's the only thing I would like to rewind and be able to take back. But aside from that, I've lived this adventure, and I kind of feel like I haven't even begun yet.
I agree. I think there is so much more adventure ahead of you. I think you are in your prime. You have your priorities straight. We talked a lot on your podcast, Kreatures of Habit, about the power of owning your own calendar and being super intentional with your habits of waking up, owning that time, putting yourself first so that you can be your best self for your family, your wife, those who you lead, so that you can be creative at the hours where you're normally creative. We talked a lot about of owning the calendar, and you have prioritized connection and relationship. You're now prioritizing that time with your wife after the meal. You prioritize 6 o'clock with your family. And we also talked about how so many, as an executive coach, so many of my leaders say, oh, if I had a wish list, I would do the following: spend much more time with my family at night or have more energy at night, but they're not doing the things with their calendar in their control to own and manage their own calendar to make that possible. So that's what I'm advocating for 2026, that connection should be our first priority. The most important who is you. So putting yourself of how you're going to fuel yourself so that you can show up as the best version of yourself for the most important people in your life. I really feel like there's this methodology here. And I'm thrilled that you're in Texas, in Austin, really prioritizing those relationships, because I know how hard you work up in New York City and building all of these brands. So going back to the question of what excites you, you said to make the most impact with people, right? So what is the one venture right now, Michael, that is having the most positive impact on people?
Well, I think Kreatures of Habit, my current business,
Yeah.
it's a lifestyle and wellness brand rooted in nutritional healthy habits. We've built an amazing community of people that are excited to really show up as the best version of themselves. And, so I think Kreatures of Habit really is making an impact in a lot of people's lives. It's certainly made an impact in my life. But I also am about to launch, it's actually launching today, a sober coaching community for men that are either sober and need a little direction, want to get sober and don't know where to go, or are just sober curious and want to see if they're leaving some money on the table by, drinking on the weekends and not showing up as the best version of themselves. So I just knew it, I knew 2026, there's so many guys out there that just, they feel lonely and they feel lost, and they kind of hide in the bottle or in the substance. And I just said, you know what, like, this goes so perfectly with my brand, Kreatures of Habit. Better habits, better life. For me, that's my story. And so I've launched this sober community called SoberFit Dude. And, I'm going to be guiding men. I'm going to be guiding men who want to make a seismic shift in their lives. And it was given to me through fitness and nutrition. That's really where it started for me. So I'm going to say, strip away all the things. And now we're going to focus on your number one priority, you. You're not going to find you in any other arena. You gotta strip it all away, and then really start prioritizing you. And that for me has come through a commitment to fitness and nutrition, and then eventually, some mindfulness. And
Congratulations, Michael! It's launch day for this new venture.
It is. It is.
This is beautiful. Whatever way, since I'm in the coaching world, however I can support you, please let me know, because what a gift that your coaching will do for so many people who might not even realize it yet.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Okay, so I feel like that is your biggest seismic shift. That's the one question I haven't gotten to, is what is your biggest seismic shift right now? And then finally, what is the seismic shift that you're seeing out there, and how can our listeners best address it?
We spend way too much time here.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
and
yes.
And so I'm on a waiting list for something called a light phone, which is a cell phone company that makes a cell phone that's actually a cell phone that has the ability to make calls, make texts, have your calendar, have a note taker. You can read a book on it, and it has a camera, but there's no email, there's no web, there's no social media. And so I get that phone in February. I'm very excited for that. And the reason why is because this phone, this thing, has the best life ever. Way better than your friends, your family, your kids, everyone. This thing gets more attention than anything on the planet. This thing sees the world before you do. You see something really cool out there, you're at a concert, you're at dinner with friends, whatever it is, your phone sees it before you do. Captures it. This is a problem. This is taking us out of life. This is taking us out of life. This is experiencing life. This is not, when this is the priority. And this is the priority for, quite frankly, I would say 100% of people, specifically people that are 65 and under. And it's a problem. And so I am witnessing people starting to wake up there and starting to say, holy smokes, my wife and I went to go see Jerry Seinfeld in the fall. and he was amazing. He's hilarious as ever. But, he had this whole bit on the phone.
He did. He's like, nope. I was at the show too in New Orleans. He's like, nobody wants to see your nasty phone.
Yeah.
Stop putting it in my face.
You went to the show too?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So, I was just like, wow.
Yes.
And
yes.
People are waking up and
Yes.
and so I do think that if there's a way to try to just get people to spend less time on their phones. I know it is a priority of mine. It is something that I am, because I have a business on social media, it does make it a little challenging. However, I've just kind of come to terms with, if I'm waiting in a line, I'm not bringing out my phone. If I'm on the train in New York, I'm not bringing out my phone. If I'm in a social setting that's new, the easiest thing to do is to just hide behind your phone. I am not doing that. In social settings, social environments, no matter how bad I want to take pictures of the food and the people and capture the moment, I'm not doing it because I want to experience my life. I want to be the one to experience my life. And I don't want to be, every time you take a picture, you're thinking about perfection, right? Like you want everybody to be like, oh yeah, stand there, oh the food filter, blah, blah, blah. Like you shouldn't be spending your life thinking about perfection through a phone.
No.
Enjoy life, right?
Yes.
And so that's a big one for me. Like talk about seismic shifts. Like I'm hoping I get that phone and I really experience way more of life. Imagine the average person spends 6 hours on their phone every day. The average person, 6 hours. That's crazy town. Imagine you just remove that. You have 6 hours of life back. Imagine you just channeled that to your family. Imagine you channeled that just to your business, right? So I think that's
your seismic shift, and that's the seismic shift. It's both.
Yeah, I think so.
I want a light phone too. I love that. And I love how intentional you are. Thank you, Carla. I love how intentional you are with 2026. When you're waiting in line, you're not going to bring out your phone. When you're in new situations with new people, you're not bringing out your phone. When you're on the subway, you're not bringing out your phone. You're going to be more intentionally present. And again, that's my goal for 2026 is let's focus on beautiful, meaningful connection, not this. Boom, Michael Chernow. I mean, this was so beautiful. I can't thank you all enough to tuning in. Can you understand why this man is freaking amazing? And he's just launching a whole new venture. He's just beginning. So keep in touch with Michael Chernow because, boy, he is one talented dude with a huge heart who intentionally leans in with his heart every single day. Thank you all for tuning in to the Seismic Shift podcast. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks, y'all. Bye. Thank you for joining us on the Seismic Shift. And before you go, can I ask one favor of you? Do you mind sharing today's episode with a leader you know? The power of this conversation is found in your using it and sharing it to create real connection in your life. Lastly, I'd like to thank Loyola University New Orleans for helping bring this content to life.